Okay, I'm going to do a quick recap of what we learned on Wednesday, March 13th, before spring break. When we introduced Chapter 5, which was about standard normal distribution, that's anything that follows this little standard normal curve. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to do one of your homework problems for you. So I'm going to choose to do number 16. Number 16 is about beagles. They tell us that the weights of beagles are normally distributed. We need them to tell us that so we can use this whole thing. The mean weight of a beagle is apparently 25 pounds. That is a big old chunky beagle. All right, whatever. Standard deviation, 3 pounds. So that's the information they gave us. And then we have 3 questions to answer, or you had to answer for homework. One was find the probability the beagle's weight is less than 23 pounds. That was part A. Part B wanted a between. So it wanted the probability that if you randomly select any beagle that its weight is between 24.5 and 25 pounds. Part C wanted the probability that your beagle was more than 30 pounds. So it's important. Okay, that is the word then. That's messy. Then, there you go. So it's important to remember all of these were 2-step problems. Your first step was to get a z-score, because in order to find probability, which is what all these are asking for, all 3 of these things right here want probability. And in order to find probability, you had to use the chart, but you can't use the chart without a z-score. So step 1 for all of these types of problems is the first thing you need to do is get a z-score. The formula for z-score is take the x value. That's your actual, whatever they've given you in the problem, whatever question you're asking. X values are always real life things like weights, dollars, test scores. That's your real life measurement. So the formula is x minus the mean. You're going to do that quantity, and then after you're done with that, you divide it by the standard deviation. That's your formula for z-score. So let's go ahead and get that for A. So I'm going to fill in my numbers there. I want the probability of being less than 23. Don't get confused with what we learned about in Chapter 4, the Poisson geometric binomial. Okay, this is different. You just use the number 23. All right, you don't start at 22 or anything like that. We're using area here, and so you can't do exactly. So just use the number that they gave you. So it's 23 minus the mean, which is right there. The mean is 25. So you do that. And then the standard deviation is 3, so that goes on the bottom. You do that in your calculator, and you get negative 2/3, which gives you... Now remember, that's the other thing, in case you were absent. Z-score, we always write in hundredths. That means 2 decimal places. So it's negative 0.67. Don't round to 0. It's not 0.7 because that would be only 1 decimal place. And you don't put 6 repeating. We don't do repeating decimals in here. So round to 6/7. That's your z-score for part A. So I told you there were 2 steps. Step 2, you're going to go to the chart. All right. And so we talked about how to read the chart. If you weren't there, I'm going to walk you through it. So you're kind of mentally going to have to pick up this z-score right here. That's a z-score. Negative 0.67. Now there's 2 charts. There's a positive chart and a negative chart. You have to make sure you're using the right one. So we're going to go to the negative chart. If you were absent, the chart is in the back of your book. It's in the index section, so page A16 and A17. That's your standard normal table. If you don't have a book, obviously you got to use something to do your homework. But you can do a Google search and just type in standard normal distribution table, and you will get a bunch of them. Just make sure you find one that's negative and one that's positive. So I'm going to pull up a chart. It's going to take just a second. And I've got to make sure I pull the negative chart up. That's the negative chart. You can't see it yet. I got to format it so that it fits. Okay, now you can see the negative chart. So that z-score that I was using, remember there it is right there, negative 0.67. That's a z-score. So here's how to use the chart. The first 2 numbers tell you your row, so I'm in the negative 0.6 row. So my 1's number is 0, and then I want 0.6. That's right down here. Now this doesn't have the 0.6, it just says negative 0.6, but that's the row that you're in. Okay, and then I have a 7. So over here I have a 7. Look at that gigantic. Oh, you know what I could do? Watch this. Okay, apparently I cannot do that. Never mind. So 7 is in the hundredths place. So that's when you look your eyeball all the way to this top row. That tells you what column to choose. So I'm in the 7 column. That's where I have 7 in the hundredths place. And it's where these two things meet. So they meet right here at the number 2514. So that's the probability that goes with a z-score of negative 0.67. So I'm going to scoot all this up, and we'll go from there. So 2514, that's the answer to part A. A wanted the probability. And that's what the chart tells you. It's important to know the chart only tells you less than value. I'm going to repeat that, okay? The chart only gives you less than. Well, that's what part A was asking, less than being 23 pounds. So once you have the chart value, you're done. That's the answer to part A. We're done with that part. Now to go to part B. Let me scoot all this stuff up. Part B wants the probability of being between 24.5 and 25.5. So that's actually a pretty lengthy problem. I wonder if it's going to let me erase this chart. Let me just see. No, it won't let me erase it there. All right. I may, I'm just going to add a new picture in there. So I'm going to scoot everything up. So let's go ahead and start part B. So part B is a between. If you weren't in class, you're going to have to scribble notes down now. For between problems, it's like two completely separate problems. So they wanted the probability being between 24.5 pounds and 25 pounds. What I want you to do is think of that as two separate problems. You're going to get a z-score for both. And then you're going to go to the chart for both and get the chart value for both. And the last thing you do to find the probability of being between is you're going to subtract the two. And you're going to take the big number minus small number. So other than that, you treat it like two completely separate problems. So let's do the first one, your z-score formula. Hopefully you wrote it in your notes. If you did not, you're going to have to listen and write what I say. So it's the x value, which is what we want the probability of, 24.5, minus the mean. So you've got to go all the way back to the original problem in the book. So this problem, the mean is 25 and the standard deviation was 3. They give you that in the problem. So I've got to subtract 25. I'm dividing by my standard deviation, which is 3. Make sure when you do that, by the way, you either do the subtraction at the top and then hit enter, and then do divided by 3, or put parentheses around the top. But if you don't do that, you're going to get the wrong answer. So if you're not getting what I am saying you should get, then it means you got to do it again, do the subtraction, hit enter, and then divide it by 3. So you get negative 0.1. Now remember, you want everything in hundredths place. So even though your calculator says 0.166666, you have to round to 0.17. That's your z-score for the first one. Now I'm going to go over here and get the z-score for the second one. My x value is 25, which is also my mean. And I subtract my standard deviation. Well, 0 divided by 3 is 0. So that's a z-score of 0. Now I've got to go to the chart for each of those. So I have to pull my chart back up. And both of these, well, the first one was negative, so I have to go to the negative chart for this one. Okay. So our first z-score, if you'll remember, it's down there, negative 0.17. That's the z-score we had for the first one. So we're on the negative chart. We've got to go to 0.1 row, so that's all the way down here. And then it was in the 7 column, so I'm over here at the 7 column. You go to where those two groups meet. Oh, you know what? So I pulled up this new weird chart that has 5 decimal places. I want you to ignore that. We're only doing 4 decimal places so that it matches your chart. So just give me 4. So that's the number right there. It's in the negative 0.1 row. It's in the 7 column. So the z-score is 0.17, negative 0.17. The probability of it being less than that is 4325. So that's the first one, 4325. So I'm actually going to pull that up because I have that chart number, 4325. Okay, let's just scoot that chart all the way up because we don't need that one anymore. So now we're going to find the other one. That one has a z-score of 0. So really, you don't need the chart for that one. If you remember when I introduced this, actually, I guess if you're watching this, you may not. A z-score, by the way, it's a number that tells you how many standard deviations you are. Remember, a standard deviation is how far away from normal or mean, how far away from the average you were. A z-score tells you how many of those. Well, if you have a z-score of 0, that means there is no distance from the average. That means you scored dead set average. You're right in the middle of that curve, and the probability actually tells you where you are on that curve as far as area, or it kind of tells you like what percent scored less than you. Well, if you're right smack dab in the middle, that means half of everybody that took that test scored below you, or in this case, we're talking about beagles. So you don't even need the chart when you have a z-score of 0. That's automatically 0.5000. So that's the z-score for, that's the probability for that one. Where'd that other one go? Where's the 4325 from before? Did I move it? I don't know where it went. Oh, I think when I scooted that up, our 4325 went away. So I'm going to write it here, 4325. Okay, so I found the chart value or the probability of being less than 24.5. I found the probability of being less than 25. If you subtract those two, you will find the probability of being between them. So you take the high number minus the low number, and that gives you between probability. So you have 0.675. That's the probability of being between. So remember, when it says between probabilities, you do 2 completely separate problems. Get the chart value for the first one, get the chart value for the second one, and then subtract the 2. And that's how you do between. All right, so now all we have to do is the last problem that they gave us. So I keep scooting all this stuff up. And the last problem they gave us, part C of number 16, says what's the probability? What's the probability the beagle's weight is more than 30 pounds? Your chart only tells you less than. I can't stress that enough. You've got to write that in your notes. Put a star by it or a circle around it or something like that, okay? Your chart only does less than. So if you want more than, you have to use the rule of complements. So if you want more than, you're going to look up the chart value for 30 and then subtract it from 1. And that will tell you more than. Your chart only tells you less than. If you want more than, you take the complement. Okay, so you really already know how to do this, but let's just go ahead and do it. Why not, right? Okay, first, step 1. Step 1, find the z-score. The z-score is my x value. That's what do I want the probability of. Okay, minus the mean. The mean was 25 pounds for the beagles, divided by 3. So you do that in your calculator. Make sure you're rounding to 2 decimal places. That gives you a z-score of 1.67 when you round to the nearest hundredths. That's step 1. Step 2, go to the chart. I'm looking up the z-score of 1.67. So when I pull that chart up, I want to go to the z-score of 1.67. I got to format this so you can see it. So I'm in the 1.6 row, and I'm in the 7, let me do red, I think it's easier to see with red. I'm in the 1.6 row, I'm in the 7 column. Good gosh, we have a lot of 7 columns in here. And where those two meet, this is kind of hard on the eyes right here, I realize that. But that's where those two meet. That's 1.679525. That's that probability. So you're going to fill that at 9525. That's our chart value, 9525. Now this tells you the probability of being less than 30 pounds. I don't want less than, I want more than. So I have to take the complement, 9525. Subtract it from 1. You get 0.0475, and that's the answer to part C.